kidding, Mr. Hitler, if you think we're on the run. We are the boys who will stop your little game. We are the boys who will make you think again. 'Cause who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler, if you think old England's done? Mr. Brown goes off to town on the A21, but he comes home each evening and he's ready with his gun. 'Cause who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler, if you think old England's done? Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler, if you think we're on the run? We are the boys who will stop your little game. We are the boys who will make you think again. 'Cause
pull up. Just on the
who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler, if you think we're on the run? We are the boys who will stop your little game. We are the boys who will make you think again. 'Cause who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler, if you think old England's done? Mr. Brown goes off to town on the A21, but he comes home each evening and he's ready with his gun.
In Greg's language, alo, alo. Today is about Sir Greg. Thank you all for bringing the love, gathering from far and wide, and showing respect for our uncle. For those of you who don't know me and my brother, I am Damara Pearl, and I was also known as Jodie Olsen, and it is my pleasure to be here in this capacity, both as Greg's niece and as your celebrant for this event. My brother Glyn and I have enjoyed trawling through our memories and memorabilia to share with you today, and we are looking forward to hanging out, hearing and learning more about Greg. Firstly, there is housekeeping to attend to. In case of emergency, the exit doors are at the entrance through the side, but due to renovations, the back doors on the deck are not accessible, and the meeting point is in the car park. The toilets are out through the back, but you can get to these through the foyer and around the back, so you are spared the walk of shame through the aisle in front of everyone. And please turn off your mobile devices. So here's your chance for those who have forgotten or have them on silent. We are filming the service today, and there will be a link that will be sent out for viewing. There is a list that's by the sign-in register that you're welcome to put your email on, and I'll make sure that everyone gets a link so you can look at a pretty copy later. Glyn and I are very grateful to the Mapua Fire Brigade for their endless support and of all the carrying in and out you have done of Greg from his house to the bunker and back. We really appreciate the carers from Access. They have been outstanding and looked after Greg really well. His dear friends and all of you in the community that are here today. And I'd also like to thank Bridget and Bevan and the team at Marsden. They've been fantastic. The order of today will see many tributes. There's lots of people who have lots to say, so I'm looking forward to that. And at the conclusion, there's going to be a guard of honour, and the fire brigade will be carrying Greg out. One last time, I promise. And as a chance to say your final farewell, there's going to be a native flora tribute, so that will be at the hearse, so you'll get a chance to place some fernery that's been picked from Greg's house, so that will join him. And then he gets to depart with a bang, quite literally, 3 of them. And then we warmly invite you to join us for refreshments in the lounge down the back of the hall. So for us, now begins Uncle Greg's story as we know about it. Gregory Kevin Olsen was born in Nelson to June and Frank Olsen on Sunday, the 23rd of July, 1950. He was a younger brother to Lane, who died last year, and much older brother to Shane, Kelly, and Frey, who joined the family through June's second marriage to Bert. Greg's childhood was fraught with a traumatic custody dispute and the bedridden days of polio. During these years, the boys lived with Frank and their grandmother Ivy in Haven Road. Greg was very close with his grandmother, and whenever him and I talked about her, he became very emotional. June and Ivy had a hat shop in Nelson way back in the day, and Greg inherited their love and skill for all things millinery, as I'm sure many of you will have worn a hat created by him, whether you wanted to or not. I lost count of how many hats we were gifted, or the obligatory hat wearing for the family photos when visiting. So his father had fought in World War II. His granddad had been a prisoner of war and escaped and managed to evade capture for many days. And that was due to his good old Kiwi bush skills and survival. And that was in the desert. He talked about it a lot, and yeah, it was amazing. To Greg and us growing up, Frank was a real live action hero. Though looking back, we realised Grandad was also a casualty of war. These events honed a creativity, love of fantasy, and a yearning for deep connections and a respect for all things wartime. Greg managed to combine all these attributes at the various clubs, events, storytelling, reenactments, and the way he chose to live his life. After surviving a serious motorbike accident, karate became part of his rehabilitation, and he loved the principles and the discipline, and these later became the foundations of his life, as was his very strong connection with the late Hanshi, Andy Barber. When we asked Greg about surviving the big motorbike accident, he was very pragmatic, in true Greg style. He turned it into a lesson, and we were waiting for something exciting, and segued into the importance of wearing the correct gear and not speeding. So we're like, roger that. So we have Greg, Uncle Greg, Great Uncle Greg, and don't forget Great Great Uncle Greg. Whenever this followed a conversation, it was either a hearty agreement Or it was a warning shot of stop, do not, pass, go. Whenever the followed a conversation, as kids, we would just push it out to the boat just to hear the and he played along with the humour. It was sort of like poking the bear. It was kind of attention, probably bad attention, but he enjoyed it. So Greg lived at Tūtaki Valley for a long time. He loved the bush, the solitude, and being part of a small community. There were times we would find him sitting outside his house truck playing the flute for the rabbits. I wasn't sure. Sometimes there was a gun there, so I was like, yeah, this is either wholesome or not.
It'd circle them out when they come out.
We would go there for family holidays in Tūtaki, and he managed to entertain us with activities using the barest essentials and lots of make-believe. We could make damper, make a fire, boil a billy, make candles, have cowpat fights. He always knew the best ones to get for that. And know which mushrooms you could pick. Come to think of it, he never mentioned why he didn't eat some of them, other than they are not for kids. We learnt to be a good shot with the slug gun. Then as we got older, using the different rifles that he had, supervised always, of course, though the semi-automatic machine gun for rabbit shooting did seem a little overkill. It was very exciting, but it was a bit, interesting. Yes, they were the bad old days of minimum health and safety and a holiday education with our uncle. His house truck was a fascination to us. He loved the freedom and the other people on the road. It was another community to connect to. Visiting him at Mapua Leisure Park was always eventful for many reasons, and another kind of education. Motorbikes of every kind, usually more so if they were classic, were his life and played a special role in his youth with his mates. It felt like there was nothing Greg couldn't do. He would have a go, find a way, and at times appeared to be a Pied Piper to us. There were always enthusiastic people ready to join in with his ideas and his dreams. The parts of Greg's life we know as his family of origin are only a glimpse of who he was. So I'm now handing over to you his family of choice to fill in the gaps. And there are many facets of his life and connections to be spoken about. I'd like to welcome up Aaron Thorley of the Mapua Fire Brigade. Thanks.
Thanks, Tamara. Thanks, Glynd, for having us take part in this journey with you guys. Greg meant a lot to us, as obviously he did to everyone else in this room. I think it would be fair to say that Greg was fairly fond of fire, guns, and nearly everything that went bang. He was a good, safe operator, and he was really, really good at using these things to entertain a crowd. So there's almost a sense of irony, really, that on the 15th of May 1997, he joined the Mapua Volunteer Fire Brigade as a firefighter. Supposedly, so the story goes, I don't know how much truth there is to it, that it came not long after he and his Fort Custard Fire Department were out driving around doing one of their reenactments in the village when the fire siren sounded. And they actually as it turns out, drove past the incident address. The lady's waving them down, and they slow down long enough for Greg to yell out to the lady, "Don't panic, Mr. Mannering," and off they go, not to be seen again. Again, whether that's the whole truth or part of the truth, it was a good story, and Greg did like to tell it. I found it quite amusing, though, that he mentioned to me several times during his time or while we were out driving around in the fire truck that he didn't actually have that much interest in fighting fires or attending crashes. So we were led to believe that his involvement with the fire brigade was because he liked to drive the trucks, and it really added to his social calendar. And on that, he was a great host. He loved organising and hosting events for the brigade, and he did this right up to the time he'd finished. His favourite seemed to be his themed social nights, which, they were before my time, but seemed like they were the hit of the village, and everyone was invited for a long and enjoyable night. Now, he'd often cater for us all, just at our brigade events, and I'm not entirely sure that culinary schools could keep up with his ideas, but at least he tried. One thing about Greg, he always took pride in making new members feel welcome. As soon as they walked in the door, he would be showing them around, and I remember when I joined, he was probably one of the first that helped me learn the layout of the trucks and started me on my firefighting journey. Also, when I was learning to drive the fire truck, Greg and I spent many hours just driving around Ruby Bay and Mapua, me in the driver's seat, Greg in the officer's or the passenger seat, and he would be giving me pointers or simply just sitting in the seat so that I was allowed to take the truck out while I was practising. Now, in 2009, Greg traded his yellow helmet at the end there for the blue, and the difference between those two was that he then gave up his role as a BA wearing firefighter. Now, I think he started to realise then that he was starting to slow down, and then it was actually 10 years after that, on his 69th birthday, he decided that his body simply couldn't keep up with being thrown out of bed at 3 a.m. to the sound of the pager, and he handed in his resignation, officially finishing with us on the 10th of October 2019, after 22 years of service. Now at this time he was awarded a life membership to the brigade in appreciation of his many years of service to our brigade and to our wider community. So thank you, Greg. Rest in peace. I also have a letter here from the Fire Services Historical Society. So he was a member of the Fire Services Historical Society before he came to the brigade, and it was one of his many passions when he was down in Christchurch. So to the family and friends of Greg Olsen, I apologise for not being able to be with you today to celebrate Greg's life. Greg was a very active and well-respected member of our society during the 1980s, even after he moved north to Mapua. Unfortunately, I'm able to be more precise than that, as at that time we didn't keep accurate service records. However, any person that supported the Fire Services Historical Society from near or far, we consider very special. I therefore wish to express our society's condolences and our deepest sympathy to all of his family and friends at this very sad time. Yours sincerely, Graham Reid. Right.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
So could I please welcome up Gordon Taylor from the Histrionics.
Hello. So I represent Histrionics, which is a very small group consisting of myself and my wife Penny and our best friends Daz and Barb, and then we're backed up by a small group that sometimes gets to be a large group of very keen and dedicated volunteers who are like-minded, who want to represent history in an educational and accurate but entertaining way, and this is where Greg comes in. Certainly when it comes to education, Greg was a stickler for detail, and he would help us to don the right uniform or insignia down to the smallest badge had to be correct. We found ourselves in the early days doing quite a lot of First World War reenactment, and this is where putties come in. And we can't get away without talking about putties when you talk about Greg, because, how shall I put it? Well, for those who are lucky enough not to know what putties are, they are just a strip of material like a bandage that goes on a First World War uniform and is worn on the leg, and you wind it up from your ankle to just below your knee. Or you start at the knee and go down to your ankle, depending on whether you ride a horse or not. Right? These are the sort of details that Greg would point out. And when I say point out, he became for us our, how should we say, Sergeant Major, Putty Inspector Extraordinaire. And we would line up as instructed and he would check our putties and would make sort of comments like, do that again. Usually to me. Really haven't got the hang of it even after all these times of being shown by him. His patience is unending when it comes to putties. But his attention to detail was one thing, but is also tinged with a sense of humour as well. Because although we've done accurate history stuff, we also done a bit of entertainment. And one of the things Greg would love to do was become a character. And one of his best characters, I suppose, is Captain Mannering, where he's waving out of the fire truck saying, don't panic, or saying other things like, you stupid boy. But he did this character, again, down to every detail, from the glasses to the brown shoes. And he stepped out and enjoyed that. But he wasn't just happy just to do it himself. He gathered a group of enthusiasts around him. And as I say, even down to the scarf that a certain member wore, who I've already mentioned, his catchphrase. So his attention to detail was one thing, his sense of humour was another. But I think what really drove him to his attention to detail was to honour and respect those people that we represented in histrionics, those characters, real-life people in real-life situations. Some heroes, some who wouldn't want to be called heroes, but they were heroes to him. And he wanted to show them honour and respect. And we would like to show him honour and respect for all he has done for us and for this community. So, Greg, we salute you.
Hang on, where's your putties?
I wouldn't give them straight enough.
That made you jump. Right. Thanks, Gordon. So now we have long-time friend, Wesley. Where are you, Wesley?
Right.
And he's about to tell us a story.
Am I? So for those of you who don't know, I know Greg from Alf's Imperial Army. This is that sort of group started by the Wizard in Christchurch to fight non-violent battles with paper swords and flower bombs. And 40 years ago, I got a call from my father from Nelson saying there's this funny little man in a leisure park dressed as a fireman who's the entertainments officer and wants to arrange one of these battles here in the park. So we popped up and were very, very impressed to see he actually had a fort. I'm not joking, it's the real fort in the leisure park that we could have a battle in. And we met with Greg there in his gorgeous little house truck he was living in the leisure park there. And I should pause here to say the wizard himself wants to send his condolences to everybody here. He was very impressed, he said, with Greg's Keystone Cop-like Fort Custard department in trendy Mapua. I don't know why he said that, but he did. We were very impressed with Greg's outfit here. Then it was called the Red Hat Brigade, if I remember rightly. They all wore red hats. And look, Damara, thank you for your story. I never knew the origin of where the hat making came from. I, of course, have Greg's hats, many of them. I recognise some of the gold braid on the hat over there, which I bought that gold braid in Kathmandu many years ago. It was really good to see it being used and worn. Greg was like that. So we came up, Alfs came up, and the McGillicuddies as well, Steve included, all turned up, and we had many battles here in the summer, camped out in the RSA Hall and at Greg's place in Toru Street, and had a great old time there. And we were all impressed. I think you know Greg was very good at making everybody included. I'm glad to hear it from the fire brigade as well. You would turn up and simply he'd hand you a jacket or a hat or something, and you were part of the club and you had a job to do, a role to play, and we loved it all. In fact, I'd like to point out to Mapua that Greg increased your population by being so friendly. Myself and my good lady at the time, because of Greg, we moved up, and we end up for a season picking apples up in Pomona Road for the cops. And I know Chris Loads and Nikki moved down from Wellington, and Pat from next door married them in the leisure park, and then Steve Christie moved down and met and married Mayon here and increased the population by 3. Thank you very much all for Greg. So we battled for many years. Greg came down to Christchurch a lot, up to Wellington for many of these things, and then 1992, I think it was, 350 years after a certain Mr. Abel Tasman sailed into these shores, we got a phone call from Greg to say, can we pop up and be Dutch sailors for the weekend? He had scored some job, convinced some government official somehow that we could do a Dutch landing reenactment, so we donned the knickerbockers and the blouses and the floppy hats and all headed over to Takaka, and of course it gave Greg a chance to fire a cannon and us to shoot a few guns off. And of the Saturday night we found ourselves, of course, in the public bar of the hotel in Takaka, as you can expect young Dutch sailors to do, drinking away there. And we spied through in the lounge bar, the official party all are there, I think with all the bigwigs, and of course our Governor-General Dame Kath Tizard was there, leading it. And to our surprise, her uniformed equerry came over to us and said, the Governor-General would like to shout you gentlemen all a round of drinks. And we were very surprised by this because we thought he was coming to tell us to shut up and keep the noise down. And there was a pause as we all looked at each other because none of us had knew what to say. And during this pause, the equerry, I think, read the room and looked at us and said, Dame Kath herself suggests that you say yes to this offer, as it's actually your money she's spending anyway. At this invitation, there was a rush to the bar, and we spent the whole night drinking at the New Zealand taxpayers' expense. So we thank you all very much. The next day we were at Tochanui parading around doing our thing, and Dame Kath came upon us. I should point out that same night when we were drinking, we were surprised she actually came through and joined our table and was a little bit disappointed to find out none of us were Dutch or spoke any Dutch, at which point she taught us all how to swear in Dutch. This was not something we knew was a role of a Governor-General, but what the hell, we tried our best. And the next day when she met us, she was impressed. We did remember those foul words. And Greg took the opportunity there, I'll never forget it, of unsheathing his sword, handing it nicely to her appropriately, and went down on his knee and asked her to knight him. And she said, what would you like to be known as? And we all shouted out, circumference. I'm still disappointed she didn't go with that one, but he said Sir Greg of Mapua, and she duly dubbed him the 3 times on his shoulders and said, arise Sir Greg of Mapua. And of course, you know, he's been known by that since. And we all had a laugh. It was quite funny, of course, until Dame Kath went back to Wellington, and somehow the word got out that she had actually dubbed someone with a sword, and she got a right bollocking from the Herald at Arms. I believe there was some communication with Greg about not using it, which he said he wouldn't use it, and completely ignored that for the rest of his life. Now, I feel no words about Greg or memories of Greg would be appropriate without actually mentioning what a cantankerous old bugger he could be when he felt like it. And we almost lost Greg 2 years ago, I think, as you know here. I was very worried about it. I myself still live in Melbourne. And I was in communication with Bev all the time to see how he was going. Ringing him up in the hospital wasn't so good. He was so confused. So sorry, Bev, I bothered her a lot with how is he going, etc. Until I got a message from Bev, which really made me feel we've got him. He's still going to be with us for a while. And Bev said, I asked how is he. She said, well, he's fine. He's now arguing with everyone who is trying to do their best for him. And I knew, Greg, we've got you for another long few years. And I'm going to say a personal farewell to Greg Eichel. Mapua will never be the same, and I've really enjoyed 40 years of friendship with playing silly buggers with this man. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Right. Mike, Perry. Mike, please welcome up for you to... You're right.
Hello. I just wanted to talk about Greg's life post-amputation. Greg had, through diabetes, had no circulation in his feet. And he had to have the leg taken off. But around the same time, he was incredibly sick. So the chances of him surviving this operation were fairly low. Greg, using some of his most controversial personality traits, recovered and made it home against recommendations from friends and the health department saying that it wasn't possible. But we all know Greg, and yeah, he's very stubborn, and he was going to do it no matter what. Yeah, so Greg had to learn Greg's house, you probably all know, has very poor accessibility, and for some reason Greg was incredibly resistant to making any changes to his house. And there was a story. He had a plan, which meant sort of A to B to C to D, right through to Z. So each one of them had to sort of run its course to get to Z. But I don't think he ever made it past sort of A or B. But I kind of had him in tears a couple of times, trying to explain why he didn't want to make changes. But Greg, he wanted to do everything under his own terms, and you could offer solutions and he would just cut you off. And that's why, we all tried to help and give ideas, but we had to do this proper sequence. And so he had to learn a new way, which meant being kind of trapped in a way in his house. And what I found impressive was just how productive he was. And all he needed was a bit of super glue here and some string, and he made the most incredible lineup of dioramas. He made a German U-boat hangar with number of different dioramas, and it kind of always kind of made me smile. He had helpers of different nationalities coming in, and I could just imagine their reaction when they first walk in, just not quite knowing what was, what they had. But I know he became reliant on these people, and they became quite good friends, and they all had to learn how to deal with Greg also. Another thing Greg did, I think, to take his mind off, I know he's into explosions and guns and things, but he was very much into his garden and tuis. He fed the tuis. And one of the main reasons he wouldn't have an obvious access ramp built, was because it would interrupt his bird viewing area, which was a ponga, and so that was another reason why he couldn't have a ramp. I know I spoke to Greg about his other leg was going bad pretty fast, and he knew what was coming, and it probably meant having to leave his house. And this is only within the last probably 2 or 3 weeks, I'd say. So he described it kind of leaving the house as a fate worse than death. And I don't know if there's some kind of timing. His health was drastically declining, so When Greg died, he basically he didn't even make a blip afterwards. That was it. He just instantly gone. The ambulance tried for an hour to revive him, and he didn't even sort of make a blip on the screen. He just sort of terminated. Yes. So I guess we're all trying to imagine a world where Greg wasn't there with all his incredible knowledge and the stuff in his head that no one else can do. He's so unique. All of that military knowledge and his sewing skills are just gone somewhere. I mean, we can all see it. But so I guess we'll all miss him. So thank you.
So Greg's little museum bunker, it was a special place, and especially for children and young men. And there was one young man who was hanging out with Greg on a Sunday who would like to speak today. Benjamin, would you like to come up?
Good day to you all. My name is Benjamin Boer, and I would like to say a few words. 3 years ago, me and my family moved to Mapua. Soon after that, I discovered the station house. Greg introduced me to his world of militaria and hats. Soon after that, he gave me a few uniform buttons, which started my World War II collection. I was inspired by Greg and his teaching, and we always talked about a lot of interesting facts and stories. I also met lots of nice people down at the station house, and we all loved Greg very much. Every Sunday I hoped for sunny weather because I knew Greg would come down and open the station house, and I will miss him very much, especially on Sundays. I will always be grateful for having met Greg and for the time we spent together. Thank you.
And we've got Dot Humphreys coming up to do a tribute on behalf of Bill and Leslie.
Thank you, Tamara. Hello everyone, I'm Dot Humphreys, and Roger and I have known Greg for many years, experiencing some fun times together, and so we were very saddened to hear the passing of Greg. Two of Greg's good friends, Leslie and Billy Brittenden from Kerwee and Christchurch, have asked me to read some of their memoirs of him. We unfortunately can't attend today's celebration of Greg's life and wish to relay a few of our memories of him. We met Greg in 1998 at the Warbirds over Wanaka show. We were unloading our Jeep and CMP from a transporter when this rather gregarious fellow strolled over and introduced himself. We have had a lasting friendship filled with fun and laughter since that time. We have also been involved with Greg in many military and reenactment shows over the past few years. Greg will be remembered for his passion and tremendous effort he put into making sure that everyone was wearing correct and appropriate clothing and accessories before each reenactment. He was a very competent machinist and could make from scratch replica uniforms, repair and alter original uniforms, and any other embellishments or insignia required to make the best representation for the show. He had a love of on-stage theatrics, together with being just as enthusiastic behind the scenes, including working in the very early days for the Wearable Arts in Nelson. His business card read, Sir Greg Theatrics, humour in uniform, which he certainly lived up to. Some of his humorous catchphrases were lines from movies such as The Battle of Britain and Dad's Army. He was also a superb milliner and made countless replica hats and other period headdress when the occasion required. Just a few months ago, we received a parcel in the mail from Greg. He had made 2 railway station master hats for us to complement the model railway Bill is in the process of building. Such was his support for other people's interest as well as his own. We will miss you, Greg, Leslie and Bill Brittenden.
And we'd like now to bring up Bruce Gilkison on behalf of the campers.
Thank you very much. I'm not a camper, I'm local, but this is on behalf of someone from Dunedin who couldn't be there, a mutual friend, Gary Marks, who came up many times with his family. The anticipation about our annual journey to Mapua Leisure Park started weeks before we left on our long journey from Dunedin. The anticipation turned into excitement, especially when we crossed the causeway into the camp. Usually our 5 children scattered off to various corners of the camp while the tired parents set up camp. It wasn't long before Sir Greg made an appearance, usually dressed in white with a marine cap on, his John Lennon glasses and bugle in hand, looking like he was straight out of Dad's army. When he blew his bugle in the morning, the kids would come running. He was like the Pied Piper. Most didn't know what was planned, but it didn't matter. It was always going to be a good time. And what amazing activities he dreamed up. Rides on the old fire engine, storytelling, housey, lolly scrambles, treasure hunts, water balloon volleyball. sausage sizzle and marshmallows, a volcano and fireworks at the beach. Thanks, Steve. Trips to the fire station museum, trips to Rabbit Island on old lifeboats. There was even a gorilla on the island to scare the kids. Thanks, hurrah. And chips biscuits from the onboard survival box. Archery and slug guns, the usual battle of Fort Custard between the clean people and the mud people. The annual candle-lit raft cruise past the camp on the outgoing tide. Magical to see the little rafts with tea tree candles inside paper bags drifting way out to sea. And let's not forget the amazing face painting designs and sometimes whole body works of art. The adults were well catered for by Greg as well, with some fantastic and unforgettable theme nights. Woodstock night, Wild West night, medieval night, MASH night, complete with old US jeeps and fireworks. African night, Roman Cleopatra night, the golf ball to Rabbit Island competition, mud wrestling in the nude on the beach, and volleyball between the campers and us village people. Equally exciting were the New Year's Eve parties and the magic shows at the Mapua Hall. Other escapades around the camp included a rendition of Hogan's Heroes, including dressing myself, this is Gary, as Colonel Clink and a very lifelike Sergeant Schultz. And when we greeted the Endeavour coming into Port Nelson with the firing of his beloved cannon. So many, many good times and memories too numerous to tell. Greg, so well remembered and loved by all, RIP old friend. Nothing less than full military honours needed for your send-off, and I think we've had something like that. I would just conclude with a couple of memories of my own. The first time I met him and later times. First time I met him, I heard him for at least half an hour before I met him. I was having a quiet evening at Fenella Hut at the top of the Cobb Valley, and heard a distant bugle, which gradually became closer over the next half hour or so. And I think the next thing I heard was the laugh. And then we got talking, found we both came from this area, and that was around 40 years ago, I think. Much more recently, tough time over the last year or so, but usually you would not pick that to talk to him. I remember going in there and saying, "What do you need?" And he said, "Absolutely nothing. I've got everything I need right here." And he mentioned the tui, and he spent time making models and just incredibly productive and busy. I remember checking just before Christmas, see what if he had any gaps on Christmas Day, and he described the day that had planned to the minutest detail about what he was going to eat and when he was going to eat it and when he was going to turn it on, quite content on his own. In one of my recent visits, I must have said something about his leg. His comment on that, it was as if he was sort of talking about, what's the weather going to do or whatever. He said, "I don't give a fuck about my leg." Go well, Greg. Yeah.
Wow, so many cool stories. I've got one more to go, and I'm reading it on behalf of Greg's long-time friend, Bev Ansell. Greg, event organiser extraordinaire, cartoonist, maker of uniforms, milliner, musician, history advisor, cook, actor, director, entertainer, practical joker, friend, and accidental knight. I met Greg in the early 80s when my sister Lou and I moved down to Nelson. His neighbour, Bob Waldie, introduced us. We would sit out around the outside fire until the wee small hours at Bob's and tell jokes and stories. I came to realise that Greg was an exceptional storyteller and a very unique character. Greg used to put on amazing parties every year at the Mapua Hall. Priests and prostitutes was a theme that stands out in my mind. Greg dressed Bob as a priest, standing at the lectern, giving a sermon. When he stepped from behind the lectern, his bottom half was dressed in fishnet stockings, pink silk panties, suspenders and stiletto heels. The whole village was still talking about that one for years after. Lou and I quickly got roped into helping Greg out with his parties. He had us performing on stage at his parties, and we had a ball. He was the consummate party organiser. In true Greg form, they were always run with military precision. Fort Custard was a big part of our lives back then, with performances at many of the events Nelson had had over the years. I remember one Christmas parade where we all walked the streets for what seemed like hours in 25-degree heat, dressed up as German soldiers, complete with great coats and helmets. None of us had taken any water and we just about expired. Another time we travelled out to the commune to Golden Bay, sitting around the fire before the event. Greg and Dave Anderson were offered a cup of tea. Both accepted. When asked if they took milk, Greg said no. Dave said yes. A little later, and after drinking their tea, Dave queried Greg about not taking milk in his tea. Greg replied that he decided to go without when he saw they were getting it from the horse. The Mapua Leisure Park was a big part of Greg's life. He lived there for quite a time and worked there for many years afterwards, organising entertainment for the kids and holiday makers. And he initiated the 4th of January battle, which then happened every year. The Alf's Imperial Army in Fort Custard, assisted by the holiday makers at the park, would do battle with paper swords, flower bombs, and I kid you not, sometimes a dwarf used as a battering ram. That one made the newspaper. Fort Custard were losing the battle that day, and Alf's had built a fortress. Greg rallied the troops, slapped a Kaiser hat on Bob the dwarf, and got 2 members to pick him up and use him as a human battering ram, winning the battle. I remember once Greg asking me to help him with a singing telegram, and he was asked by an acquaintance to do something special for a friend and then sing happy birthday. Off we went to the workplace of the lady, Greg carrying a metal detector and both of us dressed in lab coats. And he'd given me a pair of glasses with no lenses in them. Mrs. Groinge was the name of my character, and he has called me that ever since. Anyway, we turned up at this lady's office and asked for the person with a certain type of car and rego, and she appeared and said yes, that was her car. Greg told her she had travelled through a leak of radioactive material on her way to work. We had traced it all the way to here, and we would need to take her car and decontaminate it. The poor lady was starting to get very concerned, and then we burst into song, "Happy Birthday to You." Then she realised with some relief that she'd been duped. Greg was a great friend. When my daughter and I had to move out of our house, With no notice, we shifted all our furniture into Greg's upstairs workshop. It was floor to ceiling. What I haven't mentioned was that Greg was away at a marker at the time, due back on Monday. So Monday came around and I had to go to work. So I left Greg a note saying he might notice he's gained a bit of furniture over the weekend, but he was absolutely delighted to have us there. On the other hand, if Greg didn't take to you, you weren't in any doubt about how he felt about you whatsoever. He could be a stubborn old bugger. This is a theme, isn't it? Yes. We had some amazing music jams over the years. Greg played the harmonica and penny whistle and pretty much any instrument he got hold of. And she would like to say, rest in peace, Greg. I hope you've got your bottle opener. Gosh, we're so lucky to have had all these recollections and these dots getting joined for us too. But now I would like you to sit back for a spoonful of fort custard.
We bought it in 1979, so it was a private residence, and we had a vision for a dress-optional holiday park. There was lots of objections, and truly there was times when we thought it would never ever get off the ground, but we persevered and we had a plan, a vision, and we saw it through. The first season was December 1980, 1981, and they were short seasons in those days. Because we were doing so much development, it was only, just those few weeks initially. At that stage, there wasn't anything in Mapua, so everybody virtually stayed at the leisure park. They didn't go out. There was no restaurants or anything in Mapua, so they stayed where they were. In the early days, we had quite a few sort of regulars that, permanent people, and that's where Greg came into it. He had his little house truck there. He just became part of our holiday program, really, and has such great ideas, and he was just wonderful with the kids, taking them back to basics. That's what it was. Children that came from the city, never sat round a campfire, never boiled a billy, all those wonderful things he did with them. In those first years, the children's play area was just fantastic. Our aim was to have an entertainment program for children and adults. Once the kids were entertained, the parents were happy.
We built a fort to make it look like it had been there for years and broken down, all out of old pines. That really made a name for the place, and the kids named it, and it became Fort Custard. And every year there was a custard pie fight for the fort, eggs and everything else that went with it. They spend days making rolled up wooden swords, 7 sheets regulation paper, and other characters like Alf's Imperial Army. And the park people got involved, and as some people said to me, I've been working all year and I'm uptight. One day running around throwing mud at everyone and eggs, I feel as loose and happy as hell.
We had lots of bands, musicians. We had a circus one year. We'd put outdoor movies on and we'd have concerts for the kids. We would bring people in to help with painting, pottery. There was something for every child every day. As the park grew, obviously we were able to take more staff on and relieve the pressure off us. New Year's Eve, there'd be 2,000 people there. We would have a band and we would have to control that amount of people. We employed security in the end. We had a private security firm that did all of our security after that because it was just impossible to keep control of the huge amounts of people that were going through the park over the summer. And that worked really well for us. It gave us peace of mind and we could go to sleep at night and know that the security were out there. It was a great life. I couldn't think of a better business actually to provide so much joy for people in their life, because they'd come across the causeway and they'd be stressed and tired and they'd book in and they'd go away, and then 3 weeks later they'd come and book in for next year and they'd be different people. So I felt like you know, what we achieved over the years was a special place for people. The whole nudity aspect of it, I think, contributed to that, and that was understanding what dress optional is or nudity is. To taking off your clothes is a great leveller for a start. Everyone's on an even plane, and that was the key to the place in the early days. And I think people just felt like they were just letting go of everything, all the things in their problems in their life, and they got across the causeway, take your clothes off, and that was it. Total freedom.
Well, that would have been a blast from the past for a few of you here today. So Greg had a great fondness for Monty Python, so it was fitting to read a poem today. It's called the Monty Ode. He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. From Knights of Britain to Spanish Inquisition, we must have seen it all. We watched the curtains rise and we witnessed the Bigfoot fall. Despite the precedents, in spite of all evidence, always look on the bright side. Life can be a cruel joke, let laughter be your guide. When death crops up a reaping, rather than wailing or weeping, but before my soul is set to be pruned, I hope and pray my last words will be, see here, it's only a flesh wound. Greg's stubbornness, authenticity and single-mindedness could sometimes hinder a relationship. It was also his superpower that enabled him to pull together many events with historic accuracy, precision, and with his signature flourish, usually meaning his way. Whenever I have asked Greg's friends to describe him in a few words, loyal is one that is consistently used. That he was a great friend who would do anything for you and could keep your secrets safe no matter what. Even under duress, he would proclaim loudly, that was your backup. You knew that he was fine. I now ask you all to stand, if you can, for the words of committal. Gregory Kevin Olsen, your life we honour. Your departure we accept, and your memory we hold. Rest now at the end of your days. Your work is done. Rest in the hearts and minds of all who love you. Rest now in peace. So, in his memory, when you get a chance, pass on the basic skills to another generation so they can do the same in kind. Cheer loudly for the underdog and find a place for anyone willing to participate in mayhem and mirth, because the more the merrier. And lastly, support the arts. So now I would like to call for the Guard of Honour to get ready, and the pallbearers.
Some things in life are bad, they can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. Hey, always look on the bright side of life. Come on. Always look on the bright side of life. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your scene, give the audience a grin. Enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow. So always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, keep 'em laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the right side of life. Come on, Brian, cheer up. Always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life. Worst things happen at sea, you know. Always look on the bright side. I mean, what you got to lose? You know, you come from nothing, you're going back to nothing. What you lost? Nothing. Look on the right side of life. Nothing will come from nothing, you know what I say? Cheer up, you old bugger. Come on, give us a quiz. There you are. See? It's the end of the film. Incidentally, this record's available in the foyer. Some of us got to live as well, you know. All right, it's a lot. Let's get this place up there. Change this mantle within 3 weeks. What do you think pays for all this rubbish? Never make the money back, you know. I told him. I said to Bernie, I said, they'll never make that money back.
racing with the wind.